Hey everyone, what's up? Mirai here, and welcome to the slot swap video settings video for Legion. So what this video is going to show, it's going to show how to tie into the console variables within World of Warcraft so that you can make a macro that allows you to change your video settings on the fly when swapping slots. Now, character sets, slots, and game helpers and all this, these are all terms for ISBoxer, and that's what I'm going to be showing how to set it up in and for, but because these are World of Warcraft console variables, anyone can create an in-game macro that allows you to change video settings on the fly. So this is not strictly for multi-boxers or ISBoxer users. Solo players can use this as well. But we did do one of these back in Warlords of Draenor, and it was popular. And things have changed in Legion, so I pulled the old video when Legion was live, and what I did do is I did properly update the console variables for video settings for Legion on dual-boxing. There's a sticky thread at the top of the macros and add-ons subsection in the forum, which has everything that's up to date. Now, if you remember the old Warlords of Draenor video, you will remember that we used several different console variables for some of these settings. So something like view distance had 4 console variables attached to it, maybe even 5. Something like shadow quality had another 2 or 3 attached to it. So there were several console variables for some of the video settings, and it became a little confusing. With Legion, things got a lot simpler. So I think Blizzard watches my channel, and I think they watch it and they say something along the lines of, this guy's got it going on. However, all those console variables, that's a little confusing for the average user. And I agree, Blizzard. So what they did was they consolidated all of that stuff into just single commands for the video settings. So one thing I do want to talk about real fast is that I am recording at 4K. This is a personal setup and layout here. I am recording at 4K. It's going to be a little small to see the text on some of the stuff, including maybe what's in game, what I'm about to show. Especially in ISBoxer, though, I will be zooming in to show the specific text that I'm typing and writing and how I set everything up. So don't worry, I will be zooming in where I deem it to be necessary. Now the deal, I also have this overlay here that I'm sure is in everyone's face. I made it gigantic so everyone can definitely see this. It's showing my CPU load across all of my threads. It's showing that I'm running DirectX 11. I'm running 60 frames per second foreground and 30 frames per second background. You may be running 60/20, 60/15 or something. This is just what I'm doing and how I'm showing this video. I've also got my GPU load here. I'm running a single GPU at the moment. We've got 50-60% load on the GPU with the current settings I've got across all of the game clients, right? But the deal is, what Blizzard has done, thank you Blizzard by the way, what they've done is they've taken these commands, and look at view distance here, and they've simply just added the word graphics in front of every console variable, in front of every video setting. So texture, I'm sorry, that's not a good example. So texture filtering is graphics texture filtering. Projected textures is graphics projected textures. We'll do one more. View distance is graphics view distance. It's very, very, very helpful now. It's very easy to use this. So before, again, we used to have 4 to 5 console variables to just change the view distance, and it was maybe a little confusing for some people. It's gotten a lot simpler. So what we're going to be doing, I'm going to be creating a high settings macro and a low settings macro, and then we're going to be using that in ISBoxer to, we're going to tie that into when we swap slots to execute that macro in the foreground window and execute the low settings macro in the background windows. But I think that's everything I wanted to just touch on before we get started here. Hopefully. So let's jump into ISBoxer. Let's bring this back up. Okay, so in ISBoxer, let me do this because I have to zoom in. So under the game helper section, there's a World of Warcraft entry. This is where all the macros in ISBoxer are stored. And we're just going to make 2 macros. We're going to make one for high settings, one for low settings. And I'm just kind of feeling this out here. And this is because this is something that everybody's hardware is different. Everybody's computer is set up a different way. And this includes everything from just hardware to background running processes, software in the background. Maybe you've got 42 tabs open in YouTube On Chrome, that's just chewing through a ton of memory, and you've got hardware acceleration enabled, and it's really cutting into your GPU usage. Everybody uses their computer a little differently, right? I've got everything shut down in the background for this video, except for Edge. Yes, I'm using Microsoft Edge for this. Anyway, we're going to create a new macro. You right-click on the macro set name, go to New WoW Macro, do this high settings. I'm going to start with the high settings, and then we're just going to copy this. And it's going to be our template. We're just going to copy it, and then we're going to go with the low settings from there. So I'm going to go down the list here on things that I would normally change and how I think that they might affect CPU load. Some of these things are really negligible, and I don't touch them. The other thing is the less settings you change on the fly, the less of an impact that the slot swap macro is going to have. So if you set everything to the lowest on your background game clients, and you set everything to the highest on your foreground game client, and then you swap settings, that is a very large jump that the game needs to make, and the GPU and the CPU need to work with. There's going to be a big spike in usage there as the settings change from the lowest to the very highest. So just keep that in mind. If you're okay with a bit of a spike and a little bit of a delay when you swap, make those very large changes. But I try to keep the changes a little conservative. I don't like to set the lowest settings unless I absolutely have to on something, and then jump to the highest settings that I can. So maybe I should touch on this too. There's a lot to touch on. I'm sorry. But in this guide, we are missing texture resolution. And I did touch on this in the Warlords of Draenor one. We'll just touch on it here for the new people. Texture resolution is not something I will ever recommend that anybody change on the fly. And the reason for that is that if you just watch me change it here on one game client, we're going to go from high to fair. I'm going to hit apply, and the game client is going to look like it is frozen for at least 3 seconds. So I hit apply, game client's frozen, it's unresponsive, and then it comes back. So that was pretty quick. That was about 2 seconds. But still, you have to keep in mind that if you're changing texture resolution on the fly, you are going to incur that freeze every time you change slots. Is that something that you want? I say probably not, and I leave it out of the guide entirely. I'm not going to change it on the fly. I think it's completely unnecessary to change it on the fly. If you want to run lower texture resolution on your background game clients, then you should probably just set that to fair ahead of time and not swap it on the fly. However, it's up to you, and based upon the naming scheme of every other setting down here, the setting is obviously graphics texture resolution. Change it if you want, but I leave it out of the guide for anyone who just meanders into the forum and is like, oh, I'm going to change texture resolution on the fly, and then they get hit with this big delay like this when they go to change video settings. And it's pretty annoying, and then they come to me and they say, hey, Mirai, I got this delay when I swap slots, bro. How do I fix this? Stop changing texture resolution on the fly. Anyway, we're going to create our macro here. Every line is going to start with /console, you can spell that right, space. I'm going to copy that. In fact, they're all going to start with console space graphics. So I'm going to just copy that value right there. So I can just keep repasting it. Texture resolution. I don't change texture resolution or projected textures on the fly. I don't feel that these really eat into that much GPU and CPU as it is. View distance can be a big offender, so we'll type that in here. So again, /console, space, graphics, view distance, space, and then the value. The sliders that we have in Legion now go from 1 to 10 on view distance. So naturally, the values you can use on this are 1 to 10. Very simple and straightforward. So for the main window, we'll set this to 8. We'll set this to 8. For the next line, we'll change environment detail as well. So environment detail. We'll set that to 7. Environment detail can kind of be a resource hog, especially in windowed mode. So I set that a little bit more conservative. And if you kind of want a feel for this, Blizzard has said that for the sliders, 7 is pretty much the ultra setting that we had prior to Legion. So just keep that in mind for where that kind of falls. 8, 9, and 10 are obviously pushing beyond the old ultra that we had. So 8, 9, and 10 usually eat up the most resources. So just kind of keep that in mind. So we'll change ground clutter as well. We'll set this to 7. We're just feeling this out. I have not I have my own personal slot swap macro, but for this video, I'm just kind of feeling it out as we go. So shadow quality, we'll set ultra on the main screen. What's next? Liquid detail. I don't normally change liquid detail, and I'm not going to change it for this video. I usually just keep it on low when I'm multiboxing, although in some areas I might kick it up to fair. What I can say is that ultra is probably going to eat a lot of resources because it uses real-time reflections. So just, again, feel it out for your own personal setup and your own personal hardware and how it handles that if you want to change graphic detail, if you want to change liquid detail. Sun shafts, on the other hand, don't seem to do anything. I mean, I know what they do in-game. They create the crepuscular rays that come off of the sun and other objects, but they don't seem to affect GPU and CPU all that much, so I don't change it. I leave mine on high. Particle density can be quite the killer in terms of load, so we're just gonna set this to high for now. I'm not really giving this a super test run, right? There are some places in the game where there's much higher usage of particles than where I'm at in Azuna. So while I am setting particle density to high, it doesn't necessarily mean I would leave it there. If I hit some place in the game where I found that there were a lot of particles and the particles happened to be causing a lot of load on my machine, well, then I would kick that down to a setting of 3 and see how it plays out from there. So SSAO, I love SSAO. People know that about me. We're going to set this to ultra and we're going to see how this works. Something I can say about SSAO is that real fast, the low and the high SSAO is the Blizzard implemented SSAO. SSAO stands for Screen Space Ambient Occlusion. Ultra is actually NVIDIA's HBAO Plus technology. And just to back me up here, you can see this exactly here. You can see right on the tooltip it says Ultra is the NVIDIA HBAO Plus. So it's actually an NVIDIA technology. That doesn't mean you can't run it on AMD cards. But what I'm getting at is that in my experience, the high setting actually uses more GPU load, actually puts more of a load on my GPU than the ultra setting does. But that doesn't mean that ultra is all that light on load to begin with. Both of these are pretty high in resources. So just keep that in mind. If you set ultra and you're like, wow, this is too high, we need to turn this down. And then you set high and you actually get worse performance, that could be why. All of these generally take up a lot of resources, but we're going to use it for this macro anyway. Depth effects, I don't know. I don't know what depth effects does. I don't know. There's a tooltip in the game that tells you what it does, but I have no idea where this is actually even used in the game. So until I know that this actually affects something load-wise, I just set mine to high. I don't care. Lighting quality, another very subtle thing that, in my opinion, doesn't seem to affect much. So I keep it on high and I just leave it there. I don't change these on the fly. Outline mode, again, I keep it on high. I like the effect. Some people don't like the effect. If you don't like the effect at all, just disable it. It's just that easy. Some people may have load issues with it. So again, you may want to just disable it. Render scale. So I am going to set render scale here. But there's kind of a caveat with render scale. So if you use ISBoxer and you use video effects, if you originally used video effects with a standard window layout, you will know that there's a bit of low quality in your video effects viewers at that point, right? If you have no idea about how this works, then I'm sorry, but I need to tell this to people. So if you're using a video effects layout that alleviates the low resolution video effects viewers, the deal is if you set the render scale low, well, that lowers the resolution on your background game clients. And that will also affect your video effects viewers. So while I'm going to change this in this macro, if you're using video effects using ISBoxer, I don't really recommend, unless you're okay with low quality video effects viewers. So there's that. As you can see at this point in the guide, we've stopped using the word graphics ahead of everything. So I'm just going to copy this now. Render scale, I'm going to put at 1.0. You don't have to work with the decimal point. It will just accept 1. But because of the way that I'm going to change the low settings, I'm going to keep the decimal point in there. Also, I don't know if I said this in the beginning, but while these look to be case sensitive, they're actually not case sensitive. So whether you type out render scale or render scale, it's going to do the same thing. You don't have to keep the camel case wording like I have. I just have it like that because this is the way it's displayed in the console within the game. And finally, I think we're going to set multi-sampling just to, whoops, Msa Quality. I'm going to set it to 2x. I might be a little greedy with this, so we'll see what the performance is like. This is all up to you. Obviously, this is all just additional effects that, clean up anti-aliasing. And then there's the special effects here, which here's all of the things that it affects. So the FFX glow, console variable affects the death effect. Some people don't like the death effect. Some people, it produces a lot of load on their machine. So if you don't want the death effect, you have to turn off FFX glow, but you also lose the bloom. You also lose the mage invisibility netherworld effect, the fog from the Riplash strand in Borean Tundra, probably also used in several other areas throughout the game, and every other effect that creates some sort of aura around your screen. That's usually the FFX glow command. So again, if you don't like the death effect, this is it. And that's the end of the guide. So we're going to take this. Oh, we also need to set a key combination. Do not forget to set a key combination. Without a key combination, this won't do much at all. So we'll set this to Control Alt F8. Something that is obscure that won't interfere with my normal typing on the keyboard. So we've got that. I'm going to right click on it. I'm going to make a copy. Set this to, change this to low settings. Change the key combination. You do not want to have duplicated the key combination. You want those to be different. So now we've got the low settings template here. We're just going to go down the line and pick some low settings. So again, I don't really like to make that big jump from low settings to high settings. So we're going to drop this down to 2. We'll drop that down to 2. We'll drop that down to 2. Remember, those are the sliders in the video settings. Shadow quality, where are we at here? We'll go with good, I guess. We'll do good shadows in the background. Particle density, we'll turn this all the way down. We'll disable SSAO, and the render scale, this is where I'll put a 50% render scale. The in-game slider will only allow you to come down to 50%, but the actual command itself, the actual console variable, will allow you to bring this down to 0.009. So you can go less than 1% on the render scale. It's up to you what you want to see. And again, render scale affects video effects viewers along with it. As for Msa Quality, we'll set this to 0, turn it off. So there are our 2 macros, high settings, low settings. So we need to make a mapped key for this so that we can use it as a slot swap mapped key. Here's where the decision for you needs to be made. If you don't want this to be executed when your key maps are off, then put this in base hotkeys or custom hotkeys, something like that. I'm going to put mine in always on. By putting it in always on, that means even if my key maps are off, if I change screens, these macros are still going to fire off. So just keep that in mind. So mapped key. New mapped key, call this slot swap. It does not need a hotkey. Come into step 1 and right click on actions, go to keystroke action, named World of Warcraft macro action. Not the one below it. We want the named World of Warcraft macro action. Window current is the target we're going to use for this. You didn't see me click there. We clicked this little button. Macro set, we've only got one macro set. While macro, we want high settings. We want the high settings for, so window current is getting the high settings. Window current is the window you're playing from, the current window you're playing from. I'm going to right click on this, go to copy action to clipboard, right click on the word actions, paste action from clipboard. I'm going to change the target to all without current, meaning all of the background game clients. We're going to click that same little button. We're going to change the macro to the low settings. So again, high settings, going to self, which is the current window. Low settings, going to all other, so all of the other game clients, the ones in the background in this case. So once you've got that mapped key created, you need to come into your character set, click on each slot. So you're clicking on the slots in this case. We're going to start at slot 1. You will probably already have this option enabled here. So it's going to say, when I switch to this character, there's a little option here. This is probably already going to be enabled, and it's going to say, do this mapped key. And you're going to have a Jamba Master macro, a Jamba Master mapped key set here already. If you use Jamba, this is what changes your Jamba Master as you change slots. If you don't want to keep that, then just set this macro in place, and that's all you need to do. But if you do want to keep that, I'll show you how to keep that in a moment. But right now, we're just going to set this to be our slot swap macro. I'm going to copy this. So we need to do this for every single slot number. Again, this will probably already be enabled, but just change these two entries to what they need to be for wherever you put this. And then check your work. Make sure that every slot is accounted for. Slot swap, slot swap, slot swap. Good to go. Good to go. Okay, all 5 slots have been set up for the slot swap macro. Now again, if you want to keep the Jamba Master in there, you come back into your slot swap macro, into step 1, right-click on actions, key map action, do mapped key action. Keep the target the same as window current, ISB42 wow, and use the Jamba Master mapped key. This is going to tell the Jamba Master mapped key to also execute along with the slot swap. Now, if you put your slot swap mapped key in a key map that gets turned off, then come talk to me. Come to the site, come to the ISBoxer chat or something, and we'll fix it up. But for now, we're done. For now, we're done. So we can export this with Control E. Minimize this. Okay. Everybody, wake everyone up. And because we just made a macro, we need to refresh the add-on. So we've exported from ISBoxer, and that refreshes the ISBoxer add-on. But in order to refresh the add-on inside of the game client, you need to do a /reload on all of your game clients. Hit enter. It's going to reload the user interface, which refreshes all of the add-ons for the game client. And now, regardless of whether my key maps are on or off, but when we change screens, we get a bit of a change. So all the background game clients get changed. And for example, if I look out into the distance, on this screen, we can see Dalaran. We can see the shadow of Dalaran here. On all of the lower game clients, we cannot see Dalaran. There's no Dalaran down there. However, I'm going to change slots. Dalaran appears, and then in our original slot where Dalaran was, it's no longer there. So it's changing the video settings. You can also verify this if I bring up the video settings. These entries do not change on the fly. So if I change windows, the video settings are still going to change because the macro is going to execute, but the settings themselves are going to stay what they should be at. So you can see we've set shadow quality to ultra, SSAO to ultra, particle density to high. We've got view distance of 8, environment detail of 7, and ground clutter of 7. That's what we changed. And we also changed anti-aliasing. Now, if we look at the background, what's being used in the background, we can see we've got 222, we've got good, we've got low, we've got disabled, and anti-aliasing is a little off at the moment because it was using a render scale, but that's that. So I'm just going to cancel this real fast. Change windows again. And now you see that as we change, watch, there's a bit of a stutter there, right? Because it's not too bad. It's not too bad on my system, but there's something you're going to have to feel out on your system when you make that change, when you make that change between slots. Is it Is it a big deal? Okay, see, it's a little worse right there, but is that something you can live with? I don't know. It all depends on how much you want to work with this. So we do a little bit of a test run here. We run around. We can see that my load on my GPU has gone up into the 90s, high 80s, high 90s, which is probably not good. I'm probably a little too overconfident in my single GPU setup here when I increased all these settings. And a good way to kind of feel this out, this is just an example, this is just one kind of way to feel it out, is if you turn on repeater and you watch the mouse cursors in the background. If they're very stuttery, if they're very choppy, that means you're probably pushing your hardware a little bit too much. You can see that I'm in the low 90s here, so I'm still pretty okay. It's probably not somewhere where I would like to be though. I would probably like to be in the 80s a little bit more, because as you move throughout the game world, new textures are constantly coming into view, and all of your game clients are going to have to render that. So what happens is you generally want some breathing room for when those spikes occur in the CPU and the GPU. I guess maybe the best way to just feel this out is put your characters on follow and go riding around wherever you're at. Obviously, there's not a lot going on here in this corner of Zuna, so not the best place to do an actual trial run, but this is something you'll have to just test out yourself through trial and error. But if you want to come back in and you want to change, if you want to change your macro, we can come back in. I'm going to turn off the Msa Quality here, and maybe there's something else I want to change. Not necessarily. So if you just want, I mean, obviously you can just delete the line. You can just delete the line and it'll be gone. But in case you want to leave the line there and you just want to test to see if that is affecting you, you can just do a double dash. You just put 2 dashes, 2 hyphens in front of a line to comment it out so it won't be used. And of course, well, I'll leave this, okay, we won't leave this active. We'll just comment it out. That's fine. So you can see it's commented out in both. We'll export one more time. We'll minimize this. And every time you make a change to the macro, you need to reload the interface. Every change, again, you export from ISBoxer, it updates the ISBoxer add-on. And the only way to refresh that add-on in the game is through a reload of the user interface. Every change you make, reload the user interface. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to manually turn this off. And then I can just change screens, make sure everyone's set. Do a quick little run around. It is still a little bit of a stutter. It's not the end of the world. No, it's certainly not the end of the world. Things are running a bit smoother than they were before. So I like this. This is probably where I would then put my characters on follow and go riding around Azuna, and especially Val'sharah. Val'sharah is quite the resource hog. It's a very thick forested area. It's great for really dialing in your settings. But I think that's it. If you've got any questions, of course, anything simple can be asked in the YouTube comments. Anything more advanced, if you're having trouble getting this working with ISBoxer, then of course, come to the ISBoxer forum, come to the ISBoxer chat, dual-boxing, post somewhere so that people can see that information and everyone can help in the community. So I think that's it. I think we're good. So thank you for watching. Again, my name is Mirai, and I will see you in the next video.